Have you ever had that one place in life that feels like a safe haven? A place where the noise of the world fades, where the weight of responsibilities lifts from your shoulders, and you can finally breathe? For me, that place wasn't a fancy vacation spot or some expensive resort. It was something much simpler, the lake behind my home. From the very first day I moved into the neighborhood, I knew that lake would become my sanctuary. Early mornings, when mist hovered gently over the surface, I'd sit quietly and watch as the sun painted golden streaks across the water. Birds sang from the trees. Frogs croaked softly near the shore, and the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface made me smile. It wasn't just a body of water. It was alive. It had personality. It had mood swings. On calm days, the lake mirrored the sky like a sheet of glass, reflecting clouds and treetops so perfectly it felt like a doorway to another world. On stormy days, the waves would crash angrily against the bank, as if nature itself was raging. And through it all, I felt a connection to it, like the lake was part of me and I was part of it. Fishing there wasn't just a hobby. It was therapy. After long work weeks, I'd grab my rod, set my chair, and let time slow down. Every tug on the line sent a thrill through me, not just because of the catch, but because it reminded me that patience always brings reward. Sometimes I'd bring a cooler of drinks, sometimes just a sandwich, but always I brought peace of mind back with me. What made it even more special was that the lake wasn't only my retreat. It was the heart of the neighborhood. Children loved to feed breadcrumbs to the ducks that waddled along the bank. Elderly couples strolled the walking path nearby, hand in hand, reminiscing about simpler times. Teenagers skipped rocks across the surface, laughing at who could get the most bounces. It was a community bond, something pure and unspoiled. Or at least it should have been, because there was one group of people who didn't see the lake the way we did. To them, it wasn't a place of peace or joy or connection. It was a problem. And unfortunately, they had the power to act on their complaints. The HOA board. From the moment I started fishing there, the board members, especially their president, a woman everyone called Karen behind her back, treated me like I was committing a crime. She would march down in her pressed slacks, clipboard in hand, her face twisted in that permanent scowl she wore like a badge of honor. Fishing is not appropriate in a residential community, she would say. It attracts outsiders. It makes the area look undesirable. Undesirable. That was her word. I looked at the kids giggling while tossing bread to the ducks. I saw families sitting on picnic blankets watching the sunset. I heard the laughter of neighbors swapping stories while I reeled in a small fish. And she thought it was undesirable? At first, I thought maybe she just didn't like me personally. But then I realized it wasn't just me. It was the idea of people using the lake at all. In her mind, the lake wasn't for living. It was for looking. A decoration. Like a painting you hang on a wall and tell people not to touch. The HOA sent letters. They threatened fines. They claimed fishing poles created a hazard. They even tried to say that fishing disturbed the aesthetics of the community. It was ridiculous. Fishing rods weren't trash. Catching a bass wasn't vandalism. I wasn't leaving garbage. I wasn't harming anyone. I was simply enjoying the natural resource right in front of my house. I ignored them. Why? Because deep down, I believed they wouldn't push it too far. I believed there were limits to how far control and pettiness could go. After all, who would actually try to take away something so harmless? Who would actually fight against peace, joy, and nature itself? The thing about power-hungry people is this. When you defy them, even in the smallest ways, it eats at them. They can't stand the idea of someone living free when they think they should be in charge. And the more they realized I wouldn't bend, the more determined they became to break me. I should have seen it coming. I should have known that someone like Karen, with her smug smile and her need to dominate every meeting, wouldn't stop at warnings and letters. She wanted obedience. And when I didn't give it, she looked for other ways to get it. The lake, my sanctuary, my escape, wasn't just water to her. It was leverage. And soon enough, she and the HOA board would take an action so reckless, so malicious, that it would change everything, not just for me, but for the entire community. Looking back now, I realized at first with hostility, those cold stares and thinly veiled threats were just the storm clouds. What followed was a disaster I never imagined in my worst nightmares. And it all began with a lake. My lake. The place I thought no one could ever ruin. It started with a smell. Not the fresh, earthy scent of water and trees I was used to, but something sharp, chemical. I remember walking down to the lake one evening, fishing rod in hand, expecting my usual escape. Instead, I froze mid-step. The air felt wrong. Bitter. The kind of smell that clings to your nose, burning slightly as you breathe. At first, I thought maybe it was runoff from nearby construction, or maybe someone had dumped fertilizer by mistake. But when I reached the shoreline, my stomach dropped. The lake, my lake, looked sick. The water, once clear enough to see pebbles beneath, now had a strange greenish film floating on the surface. A chemical sheen shimmered under the fading sun, like oil slicks dancing across the waves. Even worse, fish floated belly up near the banks, their lifeless bodies bobbed in clusters, a scene so unnatural and heartbreaking that I just stood there, speechless. The ducks that usually waddled fearlessly toward me? Gone. The frogs? Silent. It was like the lake had been robbed of its voice overnight. I crouched down, dipped my hand carefully into the water, and instantly recoiled. It felt slimy. Wrong. That night, I didn't even bother fishing. I couldn't. I just sat by the edge, staring, my mind racing. Something was off, and deep down, I already knew who was behind it. The very next morning, I went to the HOA president's house. Karen opened the door with that smug smile plastered across her face, as if she had been waiting for me. "Well," she said, her tone dripping with satisfaction, "I see you finally got the message." "What message?" I snapped. "That lake isn't a fishing pond. It's meant to be enjoyed from a distance. And if you won't respect the rules, then the board has to take measures." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't even trying to hide it. She was openly admitting that the HOA had tampered with the lake. All because they didn't like the sight of me fishing. "You poisoned it?" I asked, my voice shaking with both anger and disbelief. Karen's smirk grew wider. "Don't be dramatic. It's just treatment, to keep things clean. Maybe it's unpleasant for the fish, but sacrifices have to be made for the greater good." Sacrifices. That's what she called it. Killing wildlife. Destroying a natural ecosystem. Robbing families of the joy they found at the lake. To her, it was just necessary. I walked away that morning with my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, but instead, I made a vow. If they thought they could get away with this, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The first step was proof. I went to the lake with clean jars and gloves. I scooped water samples, carefully labeling each container with the date and time. I photographed the dead fish, the strange film, and even recorded videos showing the unnatural smell rising off the surface. When I sent everything to the local environmental department, I hoped they'd swoop in and shut the HOA down immediately. But reality hit me hard. Investigations take time. And without undeniable proof linking the HOA directly to the poisoning, officials could only monitor the situation. It was infuriating. Here I was, watching my sanctuary die, while the people responsible strutted around like untouchable kings and queens. And they didn't stop at poisoning the lake. The HOA doubled down on their intimidation. They sent me letters claiming that I was trespassing when I fished, on land I owned. They threatened me with fines for unauthorized use of community resources. They even hinted they could revoke my access to shared amenities if I didn't comply. Every encounter was the same. Karen and her board weren't just enforcing rules. They were flexing power. They wanted control, absolute and unquestioned. And the lake? That was their battlefield. But here's the thing about bullies. They're short-sighted. They focus so much on crushing others that they don't think about the consequences of their own actions. What the HOA didn't realize was that by poisoning the lake, they weren't just targeting me. They were messing with something much bigger, something that would come back to bite them harder than they ever imagined. Because nature has a way of fighting back. And when humans tamper with it out of arrogance or spite, there's always a price. At that point, I didn't know exactly what that price would be. I just knew that the lake, The same water they had poisoned was connected to more than just fish and ducks. It was connected to the very homes we all lived in. And soon their dirty plan would backfire in the most ironic way possible. But before that twist revealed itself, I endured days of watching my beloved escape decay before my eyes. Each time I walked past the lake, I felt a mix of grief and rage. Grief for the life stolen from it. Rage for the arrogance that allowed it to happen. Little did I know, the cracks in the HOA scheme were already forming. The signs of their downfall were beginning to show. And karma? Karma was waiting, patient and silent, ready to strike. Sometimes life has a way of delivering justice when you least expect it. And in this case, karma didn't take years or months or even weeks. It struck back almost immediately. It began subtly. At first, I overheard whispers in the neighborhood. HOA board members were complaining about headaches, nausea, and strange rashes. Some thought it was food poisoning, others blamed stress. But then, the problem spread. Families living near the lake reported stomach cramps after cooking dinner. Kids were suddenly missing school because they were sick. And everywhere I went, I heard the same phrase. It's probably something in the water. That phrase hit me like a lightning bolt. Because while most people in the neighborhood had no idea, I knew the truth. I knew exactly what was in the water. One evening, while picking up groceries, I overheard two HOA members whispering near the produce aisle. They didn't notice me standing just a few feet away. "Do you think it's the lake?" one asked nervously. "It has to be. We use it for irrigation, and the community's filtration system pulls from there too," the other replied, his voice low. My jaw nearly hit the floor. The HOA had poisoned the very lake that provided water to the community, their lawns, their sprinklers, even some of their household taps. They weren't just trying to punish me for fishing. They had poisoned themselves, their families, and every innocent resident who depended on that water. The realization was equal parts horrifying and satisfying. Horrifying because innocent kids and neighbors were paying the price for the HOA's arrogance. Satisfying because it meant their scheme had backfired in the most poetic way possible. Within days, panic spread to the neighborhood like wildfire. People were furious. The water from the taps had a strange metallic taste. Laundry smelled chemical. Pets refused to drink from bowls filled with tap water. Families rushed to the store to stockpile bottled water, and shelves emptied faster than they could be restocked. I watched all of this unfold with a mixture of anger and grim satisfaction. Karen, the HOA president who once sneered at me for ruining the beauty of the lake, now had dark circles under her eyes. Her perfect hair was a mess, and her confident strut had turned into a frantic shuffle. She looked like a general who had lost control of her army. At one emergency HOA meeting, which they held by the clubhouse, dozens of furious homeowners showed up. People shouted over each other, demanding answers. "My son is sick," one mother screamed. "My grass is dying because the sprinklers are broken," another yelled. "I pay dues for safety, not to drink poison," a man thundered. And there was Karen, trying desperately to calm them, waving her hands and insisting it was just a temporary water issue. But the truth couldn't stay buried. Too many people had already connected the dots. Too many had noticed that the problem started right after the strange smell and color in the lake. That's when I decided it was time to play my hand. I had kept quiet up until now, collecting water samples, videos, and documentation. But watching the chaos, I knew this was the perfect moment to expose what they had done. I didn't confront them directly. Not yet. Instead, I quietly shared my evidence with a few trusted neighbors. I showed them the jars of contaminated water, the photos of dead fish, the videos of Karen smirking when I asked her about poisoning. Their eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in fury. Word spread quickly. And when word spreads in a neighborhood already boiling with anger, it doesn't take long before people demand the truth. Karen and her board thought they were untouchable. They thought poisoning the lake would scare me off. Instead, it was about to bring their entire empire crashing down. As I stood near the back of that heated meeting, listening to the shouting, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm. For months, I had been the target of their harassment. For weeks, I had mourned the loss of my peaceful escape. And now, The tables had finally turned. It wasn't me against the HOA anymore. It was the entire neighborhood against them. But here's the irony that still makes me shake my head. If the HOA had just left me alone, if they had just let me fish quietly at the lake, none of this would have happened. Instead, their obsession with control led them to destroy the very thing that sustained their own lives. Nature doesn't play favorites. Water doesn't care about power. And when you tamper with something so fundamental, you pay the price. The HOA was about to learn that lesson the hard way, because the sickness, the outrage, the bottled water panic, that was just the beginning. The real storm was yet to come. And I was ready to make sure everyone knew exactly who caused it. The neighborhood had already reached a boiling point. Parents were furious, families were scared, and even pets were suffering. People didn't trust the water running through their own taps, and they wanted someone to blame. And I had everything they needed, proof. I spent hours organizing my evidence. The jars of murky, chemical-smelling water, photos of fish floating lifeless in the shallows, videos of the strange, oily film covering the surface of the lake, and most importantly, my recordings of conversations with the HOA president herself, Karen, smirking as she admitted that sacrifices had to be made. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was undeniable. I reached out to the local news station, and within 2 days, a reporter was standing by the lake with a camera crew. I'll never forget the moment their headline hit the evening news. HOA accused of contaminating community water supply. The story exploded. Suddenly, our quiet neighborhood was swarming with journalists, environmental inspectors, and angry residents demanding answers. Cameras caught every second of it. They captured the lake in its poisoned state, the residents carrying cases of bottled water into their homes, and the HOA board trying desperately to dodge questions. When a reporter shoved a microphone toward Karen, asking, "Did the HOA authorize chemical dumping in this lake?" Her face turned pale. She tried to brush it off, insisting it was routine maintenance. But the more she spoke, the guiltier she sounded, and the angrier the crowd around her grew. Mothers screamed at her for endangering their children. Elderly couples shouted about paying dues for safety, not poison. And the once loyal board members were suddenly silent, avoiding her gaze. It was chaos, but this time not aimed at me. Authorities stepped in quickly. The Environmental Protection Agency and local water authorities began testing the lake and nearby wells. Their results matched my evidence almost perfectly. Toxic chemicals, dumped in high concentrations, traced directly back to the HOA's hired contractor. The truth was undeniable now. The HOA had knowingly poisoned the community's lake under the guise of pest control, never disclosing it to residents, and in doing so, contaminated their own water supply. And the consequences hit like a hammer. The HOA board was summoned to court. Several members were fined heavily for negligence, and the president herself faced criminal charges for reckless endangerment. The association was ordered to pay for the cleanup and restoration of the lake, a cost so massive it nearly bankrupted them. The once proud, controlling board was now a group of disgraced, desperate individuals scrambling to save themselves. But for me, the most powerful moment wasn't the legal punishment. It was standing by the lake one evening, watching as news crews filmed their closing shots, and a neighbor came up to me. "You were right," she said softly. "If you hadn't fought them, if you hadn't spoken up, we'd still be drinking poison." Her words spread to me like warmth after a long winter. For so long, I had been painted as a troublemaker, the rebel who refused to follow the rules. But now, everyone saw the truth. I wasn't a villain. I was the one who saved them from the real villains, the HOA who thought power mattered more than people. And the best part? Justice wasn't just coming from the courts. It was coming from the very community the HOA had tried to control. Homeowners demanded new leadership. They voted the corrupt board out one by one and replaced them with people who actually cared about the neighborhood. People who wanted the lake restored, not as a decoration, but as a place for everyone to enjoy again. Karen, once untouchable, was now a pariah. She couldn't walk down the street without people whispering, pointing, or outright yelling at her. The queen of control had become the face of shame. As I watched it all unfold, I realized something. The HOA had built their power on fear. But once that fear was gone, once people saw the truth, they crumbled. And the louder they tried to defend themselves, the clearer it became that their empire was built on lies. And all it took was one poison lake to bring them down. When the dust finally settled, the neighborhood didn't look the same. The poison lake had left scars, dead fish, brown patches where grass once thrived, and an eerie silence where ducks used to swim. But those scars told a story, and that story became the downfall of the HOA. The court's verdict was clear. The HOA was guilty of negligence and reckless endangerment. Heavy fines drained their accounts. They were ordered to pay for environmental cleanup, water treatment, and the restoration of the lake. What they thought was a quick, clever way to stop me from fishing turned into a financial disaster that nearly bankrupted the association. Karen, the woman who once strutted around with a clipboard, barking orders at everyone, wasn't strutting anymore. She was forced to resign in shame. Neighbors who once feared her no longer even made eye contact with her. The woman who believed she was untouchable was now the face of disgrace in our community. But the punishment didn't stop with fines or resignations. The true punishment was the slow realization that their arrogance had poisoned their own lives. Every board member who signed off on the treatment plan had to explain to their families why they were drinking bottled water for weeks, why pets had fallen ill, and why the community they were supposed to protect had turned against them. Meanwhile, the lake began to heal. Restoration crews worked tirelessly to flush out the chemicals, reintroduce oxygen, and rebuild the ecosystem. At first, it looked hopeless. But nature has a way of bouncing back. Within months, new fish were stocked. Ducks returned cautiously, as if testing whether it was safe again. The water slowly shifted from sickly green to its natural blue. The first day I saw a fish jump in the water again, I couldn't help but smile. My sanctuary was coming back to life. And this time, it wouldn't just be mine. It would belong to the whole community, protected from the greed of a few power-hungry individuals. Neighbors who once thought I was stirring trouble now greeted me warmly. Some even came to fish with me, admitting they had always wanted to but were too afraid of the HOA's wrath. Families started picnicking by the shore again. Children tossed breadcrumbs to ducks, their laughter echoing like it used to. For the first time in a long time, the lake wasn't just my escape, it was our escape. And through it all, I couldn't help but marvel at the irony. The HOA tried to strip me of peace, but in the end, they lost everything. Their money, their reputation, and their power. Their attempt to control nature backfired in the cruelest, most poetic way possible. Because here's the truth. When people act out of hatred and greed, they often dig their own graves. The HOA didn't just poison a lake. They poisoned their trust, their credibility, and their own future. And me? I still sit by that lake with my fishing rod, line cast into the calm water. Every time I reel in a fish, I remember what happened, and I smile, because the greatest revenge wasn't me fighting back. The greatest revenge was simply letting karma do its work. In the end, the lake taught us all a lesson. Nature can heal, communities can unite, and power built on fear never lasts. The HOA thought they were untouchable, but karma reminded them that no one, not even them, was above consequences. If you like this story, comment, and subscribe.